Will Shedeur Sanders be the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints next season? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosevoglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers. Have been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Vicknair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. The New Orleans Saints have the 9th pick in the NFL draft, and while they could move up, they can move down, they could stay at number 9. The question is, will they take a quarterback in the first round of the NFL draft, something that they haven't done in decades? And while I don't know it's a certainty that the Saints will take a quarterback, I think when you start to hear the rumblings and you see where momentum is heading, there's a legitimate possibility the Saints find themselves a young gunslinger, put him in New Orleans, and see what they can do in Kellen Moore's offense. And while there were rumors about them possibly trading up for Cam Ward, there are still rumors about them liking Jackson Dart and having great interest in him since the Senior Bowl in January. It seems like the latest momentum is heading towards the Saints potentially, not definitely, potentially drafting Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. Shedeur, obviously from a production standpoint, had a heck of a career. It is difficult to evaluate him, though, whether it's the offensive line at Colorado being abysmal, whether it's the fact that the majority of his passes were kind of thrown near the line of scrimmage. You don't have a ton to work with as opposed to seeing what Cam Ward's done off script and things of that nature. But Shedeur's obviously a very talented quarterback, and he is a guy that really, excelled, I would say, in an offense that was led by Pat Shurmur, who was a former NFL head coach. So there are positives there. That said, what's really fascinating is that yesterday, kind of out of nowhere, to be honest, Shedeur all of a sudden gets linked to the Saints because the Saints are the odds-on favorite to draft him. And while that doesn't necessarily mean the Saints are going to take him at 9, it poses the question, should the Saints consider taking Shedeur Sanders at 9? And there's going to be a lot of dialogue about this. And if you guys are here in the chat today at any point, leave your comments, your thoughts. I'll pull them up as we go. Here's where I'm at when it comes to this Shedeur Sanders situation. If the Saints are sitting there at 9, or if they say, and I'm not saying they necessarily should do this, but if they say, we could move up to 6 and take him just to make sure no one leapfrogs him, but let's just say they stay at 9. If the Saints draft Shedeur Sanders, I don't know if it's going to work out, but I'd be damn excited if they did that because I do believe this team is in need of a reset. I do believe this team is in need of help at the quarterback position. And while they've tried with mid-round picks, if you're going to try and get a young quarterback, you have to take a big swing. And I think taking a big swing in the first round, albeit it's been labeled a weak quarterback draft, is a respectable thing, in my opinion, to at least take the swing in the first round as opposed to continue taking flyers in the 4th and 5th round of an NFL draft and hoping that you can make water turn into wine. It's just not very easy to do. So when it comes to Shedeur, he is not perfect. In terms of wow traits, I don't know if he has a wow trait. I just think he's a smart quarterback who is a really good point guard / distributor of an offense, which is not a bad thing to be. When I see Shedeur Sanders, and I've said this before, I don't know if he'll reach this level, but I think he's way more likely to be a, Jared Goff type of quarterback than he would be, one of those elites of elites like a Joe Burrow. That's where I have him at. But guys like Jared Goff, if you're able to tell me that Shedeur becomes a Jared Goff, I'd be okay with it. But this is where the real meat of the situation comes into, and the real, dilemma that people have is, wait till 2026. I've heard that a lot when anyone brings up a quarterback to the Saints. Everyone says, wait till 2026. You can get Arch Manning. You can get Drew Aller. You can get all these guys. We don't know what 2026 is going to look like. And the NFL stands for not for long. And if you're Kellen Moore, if you like one of these quarterbacks, and Shedeur is that quarterback that you do like, let's just say, just draft him. Go get your guy. Because I don't know if Arch Manning's coming out next year. I don't know if Drew Aller's going to, progress into the quarterback that he wants to be. Injuries happen. People don't develop the way you want them to. Guys decide to stay in college for another year. There's no guarantees. And if you're Kellen Moore, and you don't love your quarterback situation right now, and you really want to get a young quarterback in the building that you handpicked, Do it now. You have more time to grow with that player as opposed to waiting until year 2. Because if you're Kellen Moore and year 1's a stinker and you don't get your quarterback till year 2, and year 2's kind of a stinker because your quarterback's developing, guess what? You're going into year 3 with 2 subpar seasons under your belt. You're going into year 3 not knowing if you have your quarterback, and who knows where that sets you. So and again, it all really to me hinges on this kind of variable. If Kellen Moore likes a quarterback in this draft, I say you go get that guy. And I would be saying the same thing if it was Jackson Dart, because everyone's like, well, is it all because of the name and flash of Shedeur? If the Saints say they really like Jackson Dart and they take him at 9, I am not going to bitch and moan about that pick. I want them to swing and take a quarterback. It doesn't mean you take one for the hell of it, because that's how you make a huge mistake. That's how you set back the franchise. But if Kellen Moore sits in the meetings, if the GM, if the rest of the scout team is in these meetings, it feels like, hey, we can take a quarterback at 9. We like a quarterback at 9. Do it. Just go do it already. And for anyone saying, oh, I don't want them wasting a first-round pick on a quarterback, let's just look through their history. Let's just look through their history of what they've drafted in the first round anyway, because it seems like they like wasting first-round picks. Fuaga, good pick, no complaints. Ryan Brzee, good pick, no complaints. Olave, good pick, no complaints. Trevor Penning, who knows? Peyton Turner, he fucking sucks. He's not even on the team anymore. And if you want to tell me, oh, he's good, he's just never healthy, okay, availability matters. He never plays anyway. That was a waste of a first-round pick. Cesar Ruiz, that was a waste of a first-round pick. Marcus Davenport, sorry, another waste of a first-round pick. Anything, that's a waste of 2 first-round picks. So this idea that the Saints can't take a quarterback first round, they got to use it on another position. They can whiff on another position as well. You got to take a swing at quarterback at some point if you like that guy. So where I'm at with the Shedeur thing is, do I think Shedeur is the best quarterback in the draft? No, I don't. I do think Cam Ward's better than Shedeur Sanders. Do I think that Shedeur can have success with the Saints, though, and Kellen Moore can get the best out of him? It's possible. It's possible. We've seen Kellen work with a plethora of different quarterbacks, granted all talented ones, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, and now Jalen Hurts. If he believes he has a guy in this draft that he can mold, go do it. And I'm sorry, do we want the Saints to go into this season where Derek Carr is the de facto starter without a doubt, starting all 17 games, but he doesn't want to fucking be there? And for anyone saying, oh, when the games start, he'll be okay, I don't know. We've seen one public appearance from Derek Carr since January, and it's him at the Fresno State spring game, I believe it was. That's the only public appearance this guy has made. So you tell me, if you're Kellen Moore, if you like a quarterback in this draft, you're not going to take it? You can't bank on next year. You can't bank on Spencer Rattler. You sure as hell can't bank on Jake Haener developing. So if you like a guy, I say take a swing. So for me, I believe that it's worth it. So we'll see what happens. And I think this is a big factor of it too. It's all about how the draft plays out. And as we sit here today, I genuinely believe the first 3 picks are going to be Cam Ward to the Titans, Travis Hunter to the Browns, and then Abdul Carter to the Giants. The Giants, there was so much talk about them potentially taking Shedeur. The fact that that's kind of just hit the brakes, I think, is telling. They obviously signed Russell Wilson. They signed Jameis Winston. Those are guys that are ready to start right now. And for a team that is kind of in limbo of whether or not they're going to keep their coach and GM past this year, probably makes sense to not go after it. So for me, if you're sitting there at 9, I think that it's fine with me. It's fine with me. This team has neglected the quarterback position in the first round for too long. If you go take a Shedeur, go take a Jackson Dart, whatever at pick 9. Obviously, Shedeur, I think he's better than Jackson Dart, but I can understand if you feel like you have more tools at your disposal with Jackson Dart, you can develop him better. That's totally understandable. I wouldn't be mad about that at all. It's time to take a swing. Drafting Ian Book, waste of a pick. Drafting Jake Haener, waste of a pick. I'm not going to say drafting Spencer Rattler is a waste of a pick yet, because at least Rattler looks like he can play quarterback in the NFL to some degree. The other 2 guys couldn't. Still, you're taking a mid-round flyer. It's very hard for those guys to hit. So if I'm New Orleans and I like Shedeur Sanders and I believe that he could be the guy, and I'm picking still at 9, I'm not even mortgaging 2 first-round picks like I am for Cam Ward or whatever, I say you do it. And you give yourself a longer runway, Kellen Moore, with his young quarterback for year 1 to take the lumps, year 2 to build something, and year 3 to be the special year that you kind of take that next step. That's the hope. That, to me, that is the hope. So We'll see where the Saints go. I don't know if they're going to go quarterback. I could see them going playmaker, whether it's wide receiver or tight end. I could see them adding a corner. I would imagine they'll add a corner if they don't do it at pick 9, maybe at pick 40. I really could see them going that route. They need DB help. But at pick 9, if there is a really good quarterback on the board, in your opinion, and you like him, you go get him. I'm tired of the Saints waiting around. I believe it's time for them to address it. And, I think this idea that you can bank on 2026 is just completely false. I am not convinced Arch Manning's declaring next year. I'm not convinced the Saints are going to have a top 5 pick next year if they roll it with Derek Carr and this veteran crew. Let's say they don't play well, but they're picking 7. If you believe next year's quarterback class is that good and you want to get up to pick 1, are you ready to mortgage 3 first-round picks and a little bit more? The answer is no. Maybe you take your swing now. That's just the way I look at it. Maybe I'm wrong about it, but that's where I'm at with the situation. So let's go into it. Let's get any comments that you guys have, and we'll go from there. Going to start off. Jerry saying, morning. Bobby saying, yes, we should draft him. I'm in agreement, Bobby. I kind of feel like, look, pick number 9. Some people might get frustrated and say it's too rich for their blood. The Saints have not really been aggressive when it comes to going after the quarterback position in the draft. So I'd be cool with it. Jerry says, I don't see the Saints getting Shedeur. I'm kind of, in between. I'm on the fence about it. There's so many rumblings that it's tough to ignore, but I also kind of have my doubts about whether or not the Saints actually draft a quarterback in the first round because we haven't seen it. So it's one of those you got to see it to believe it type situations. That's where I'm at with it. Bio Boys 504 says he's not going to last that long. Are you talking about last that long in the league or last that long in the draft? If you're saying last that long in the draft, I believe he will get to number 9. If you're saying last that long in the league, who the hell knows? It's very difficult to predict what a quarterback's going to be in the NFL. It's the hardest position to evaluate. Name Not Dot says if people believe in Spencer, they should believe in Shedeur. That's what cracks me up, right? Us as fans, we convinced ourselves that, hey, Jake Haener liked Drew Brees, maybe he could be good. We convinced ourselves that Spencer Rattler was like the next coming of Patrick Mahomes for a brief month. You can't convince yourself that if they take a quarterback at 9, that you can't convince yourself that could be the guy. Like, I find that hard to believe, Yellow Nose says if he falls and we don't take him, I don't think there's a pick they can make that will excuse it. Sorry, we had a chance at Patrick, Jordan Love, and Lamar. Shaking my head. When does it stop? Look, for me, I'm kind of in agreement there. I'm tired of the Saints being in position to take a quarterback in the future, and they haven't done it, right? They wanted Mahomes. We all know they wanted Mahomes. They didn't take him. You didn't move up and be aggressive enough because you thought he was going to fall to your lap. Boy, does that suck, because if the Saints went from Brees to Mahomes, we would be the fan base celebrating a dynasty, and we're not. You had a chance to draft Lamar when you traded up. So did all other 31 teams. Instead, you go for Marcus Davenport. That blew up in your face. So when the Saints drafted Cesar Ruiz, and you guys can go through my tweets, and I don't even know if he's a good quarterback, so I'm on the fence about this one. It's not like Lamar or Mahomes' situation. I thought the Saints should draft Jordan Love. That was actually like one guy that I really liked in that year's draft class. Now, Jordan Love has not developed the way I hoped he would. He's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback, and he's very inconsistent. But even then, they took Cesar Ruiz as opposed to taking a quarterback there. Name Not Dot says, I think the Titans should move on from rookie quarterbacks. Possible, but I do think they're going to take one. I believe they're going to take Cam Ward. It kind of seems like it's moving that way. Calvin says, Dart took 6 snaps under center. It's definitely the concern. It's also a concern, I think, with young quarterbacks all the time now. They really don't take snaps under center. It's like a lost art for some ridiculous reason. And part of me feels like that's why a lot of quarterbacks have shit footwork now compared to back then. It's like you've enabled them to just play from the shotgun the whole time. And the fundamentals that made guys like Drew Brees excellent, they're just not practiced anymore. Yellow No says Mickey's holding on to this because he refuses to admit he effed up, didn't want to move on from Dennis, and holding on for dear life for Derek, trying to save face. Shaking my head, we got to move on. Look, I understand why they kept Derek Carr. I always said, he is the easiest way to be cap compliant, keeping him. I got that. But he clearly doesn't want to be here. And anyone thinking otherwise is just being naive about it. He's not in New Orleans. He has no interest in talking about New Orleans. He has no interest in talking about the Saints' new coaching staff. He made it very clear on Instagram he was moving back home to Fresno. He does not give a shit about playing for the Saints right now. And that's fine. You don't need to love the place you're playing at. But when it comes out that he wanted to explore the market and see what was out there, and I understand why, there's teams that need quarterbacks, and you keep him, there is going to be a little bit of kind of sour grapes between the two. Calvin says Carr's going to take his ball and go home again. He might. Yellow says, tired of being in purgatory from ego and dumb contracts. I will say let's put it this way. The dumb contract aspect, I think we're almost done with. I think as the Saints, if you want to give them credit for one thing over the last 2 years, they are starting to be more financially responsible. They've made one big signing, in my opinion, the last 2 years. It's Justin Reed. And I really like that signing because it's not a burden. It's like a 3-year, $31 million deal. So the dumb contracts they're going to be out of. Ego is another thing. I think that is, we could talk about that all day. The biggest problem for the Saints is they haven't drafted well. If we're going to keep it like 100%, that's it. Xavier says, would you hate Dart at 9 if Sanders is gone? No. This is where I'm at, guys. And if you want to call it a cop-out, you could call it a cop-out. I am in the business of if Kellen Moore likes a quarterback and if Mickey Loomis and the rest of the front office likes that quarterback and they believe that he can be their franchise guy and they take him at 9, when the pick happens, you will not hear complaints from me. Now, if the pick ends up failing and the player's a bust, yeah, I'm going to do what I usually do, which is bitch and moan. I mean, surprised that I'm going to bitch and moan about it. But in the moment, when they draft Shedeur or they draft Jackson Dart, if they take one of those guys and they believe that player is the future, I can't sit here and say, oh, it's a terrible freaking pick. And I'm not going to, because you got to take a swing at quarterback. You can't just leave it the way your depth chart is. Bayou Boys 504 says, all the pros got us drafting Jalen Walker, and I meant last along in the draft only because the Giants have idiots in their front office. Yeah, that's fair. I would say this, though. I believe the way things are trending, the Giants aren't taking a quarterback in the first round, but with their first pick. Maybe they trade back into the first round if they like a guy. Let's say the Giants don't take Shedeur at 3, the Saints take him at 9, and the Giants, who are picking very early in the second round, say, hey, we like Jackson Dart. Let's go get that 5th-year option on his contract, and then they move back in. That's possible. But I think right now, with the way things are trending, with Abdul Carter, at least odds-wise, not expected to go to the Browns, the Giants can take Abdul Carter, who's arguably the best player in the draft, put him on that D-line with Dexter Lawrence, with Brian Burns. They won't have to pick up the 5th-year option on Kayvon Thibodeau, which is good for them because Kayvon's been kind of all over the place. One season good, one season bad. It's tough to predict what you're going to get out of him. I think for the Giants, I see them going that route. Doesn't mean I'm going to be right, but that's just kind of the route I see them going. Montauk says, no, it's the ones that don't want to draft a quarterback at 9, but want to wait on Arch Manning for 3 years. Look, that's kind of where we're at, right? It's crazy to me that we're at that point where people are like, oh, we can just tank for Arch. I'm going to say this about Arch because I think Arch is going to be a good quarterback prospect. I'm not going to give you a hot take and say I don't think he's going to be any good. I'm stupid, but I'm not an idiot. I think when it comes to Arch, he's going to stay for another year. I think that the Mannings value development at the college level. And this is something that I've talked about with Archie. I had an interview with Archie about a year ago, and I asked him about, Arch staying for another year, even though Quinn was coming back and he'd have to sit on the bench. And he was talking about, Arch is still going to get his 2 years to start. And he was adamant about talking about getting those 2 years to start. And while he did start some games this year, he didn't start a full season. So could he start the 2025 season and the 2026 season and then go pro? I could see that happening. So then where are you at in that situation? Because we don't know where the Saints are going to be at in 2 years from now. And regarding Arch, the way I view things and the way the Manning family operates, I can see the Manning family not wanting Arch to play for a franchise that his grandfather or his uncles played for. Eli didn't go to the Chargers because the Manning family didn't want both their sons in the AFC, and they got their wish. So I don't see Arch playing for the Colts. I don't see him playing for the Giants. I don't see him playing for the Broncos. I don't see him playing for the Saints. Maybe I'm wrong for thinking that, and it's like a conspiracy theory. I just don't see a Manning playing for one of the teams that the other Mannings played on. There's an added pressure to it that I don't think they'd want. Calvin says, won't trade a 1st and 3rd for Sanders, but want to trade the entire draft for Arch. Yeah, that's pretty much where they're at, right? The amount of people who see this quarterback class and they go, oh, it's a weak class, just wait for Arch. Guys, I remember a couple years ago, we were talking about a draft class that had Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, and Mac Jones, and it was supposed to be great. And now we fast forward to the year 2025, and only one of those guys is a proven starter in Trevor Lawrence. And frankly, he's been underwhelming. Trey Lance, bust. Zach Wilson, bust. Mac Jones, bust. Justin Fields for now is a bust. Let's see if he can revitalize his career as a starter for the Jets, but obviously going to the Jets is usually a death sentence, so he's more likely than not a bust. And Trevor Lawrence, who's been an okay quarterback, was supposed to be the second coming of Andrew Luck, and he hasn't been that. So, like we've had great quarterback draft classes on paper that have failed. So, yeah, on paper right now it's supposed to be weak, but I don't know. I don't know if it will be. Jerry says, no disrespect, Chris, but anything can happen in the draft. That's why I said the Saints are not getting Sanders. Yeah, no, absolutely, Jerry. You're 100% right about that. Literally anything can happen in the draft, right? Like, there's rumblings about the Steelers liking Shedeur. What's to say the Steelers don't say, hey, we're tired of waiting for Aaron Rodgers. We're going to trade up and go get our quarterback. So, yeah, the draft's unpredictable as hell. It's so unpredictable, But I do believe the Saints have done so much quarterback work the last couple months that, man, you'd have to think they like one of these guys at some point in this draft. Montauk says, I think Dart is the only other quarterback the Saints would draft at 9 besides Ward and Sanders. I do agree with that. They've done a lot of homework on him. Yellow Nose says, you're absolutely right. We have not drafted well. Problem for me is we have great players and proceed to play them out of position and watch them go shine elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, look, Zach Bond's obviously at the top of the list in terms of what happened there. Caden Ellis, I think, was more so depth and timing, right? Because Caden got his chances last year to play where he wanted to play with the Saints, and he played great. But look, you had DeMario, who was still playing at an all-pro level. You had Pete playing pretty well. It was one of those where it's kind of just a tough business move, and it happens. But I understand the frustration with that. Navarre OTR says, my reaction to taking Dart at 9 would be depending on who's also on the board at that time. Yeah, I think that's fair. If Sanders is there at 9, the only person I would take over him available is Mason Graham. I love Mason Graham, so you won't get a bad word out of me from Mason Graham. I think he's a great player, and I would be cool with the Saints taking him if that's who they end up getting. I think he'd help out that run defense. 99 Dog says, I just take the absolute best player available at whatever position at 9. If Sanders is it, then so be it. I don't think you're wrong in terms of the fundamentals of it. I do believe, though, positional value matters for teams. And, when you look at, the Saints and where they're at right now, I do believe that, you're probably you're going to value quarterback a little bit more. Like maybe BPA might be, let's say Mason Graham's there and he is ranked a spot or two higher than Shedeur. You might just end up going Shedeur just because of the position he plays, So that's kind of where I'm at. Bayou Boys 504 says, no, you're right. Archie's not going to let him come here, just like what Eli pulled when he got drafted. I just don't see it happening. Yeah, and look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm being like a stupid conspiracy theorist about it. But I just don't believe that, it's going to be a situation where he goes to New Orleans. I just don't think the Mannings are going to allow it. It's just how they operate. It really is how they operate. I just don't see it. Montauk says, Archie's still mad the Saints beat Peyton in the Super Bowl and his family could enjoy the celebration of the Saints in the city's first world championship. Yeah, maybe that stays a little bit. Yo, no says maybe they see something in Spencer. I don't know. I get bringing Derek Carr back for his cap reasons, but cool. But they don't take a quarterback this year. We don't have a high pick next year. A 7-10 season won't be good enough to draft high, so we got to sign or roll with Spencer. Not that I'd be mad, but I'm really lost at the process. That's why I kind of think they're going to go quarterback at some point this year. And again, look, I could be wrong. I love the Saints. They're my favorite team I've watched. They are not. I'm not a genius. I am not predicting the future. They've done a lot of quarterback homework. And I kind of wonder if this is just the year that they pull the trigger on it. Because to your point, like, not now, when? You're picking 9. If you play Carr the whole year, you might probably, look at a 6-11, 7-10 season. And if next year the draft class is supposed to be as good as people say, it's going to cost more to move up. So you put yourself in kind of a bind. Kenneth says, I'm not convinced of Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, but what about Kyle McCord or Tyler Shuck? Yeah, look, Shuck's the one who, I think it's Louis Riddick who's just been all over that. He has been raving about him. He's got an interesting journey, right? He's an older prospect, kind of been, through the ringer. McCord, I think, is a name to watch. If the Saints don't draft a quarterback early, I can see them drafting Kyle McCord later on in the draft. Reason I say that is, the minute the Saints hire Kellen Moore, Dan Orlovsky, who is still close friends with Kellen Moore, they played with played in the same team in Detroit, and they have maintained a really good working relationship. he mentioned immediately after the Saints signed Kellen Moore and made him the head coach, he was like, look at Kyle McCord as a potential option for the Saints. He fits what Kellen Moore wants to do. Again, would that excite the fan base? Probably not. That really goes back to taking another mid-round flyer on a quarterback. But, you mentioned McCord. I do believe he's a guy that's on the Saints' radar. I do. BioBoys504 says, you think Kellen wants a quarterback like Jalen that can run that offense he ran last year with the Eagles? Shedeur doesn't have that legs for that scheme. I don't think Dart does either. I think Dart has way better athleticism than Shedeur. Personally, I think Dart actually is a pretty good athlete, in my opinion. And measurable-wise, is very similar to Jalen Hurts, which is kind of funny. But I don't know, right? Like, that's the thing. We don't necessarily know what Kellen Moore's ideal quarterback is. Because when you're OC, yeah, you're given parts, and I'm sure there's a say on what you want from the game planning, but he's not picking the quarterback. Like, he went to Philly, Jalen Hurts was there. He went to Dallas, Dak was there. He went to LA, Herbert was already there. Like, we don't know what his ideal quarterback is. Now, if he's trying to run last year's Philly system, then yeah, it's very hard to do with Shedeur. Shedeur's not that type of guy. Shedeur is way more of a, prototypical quarterback than he is the new dynamic quarterbacks that we've seen around the league. Logan says, my ideal draft would be trading 9th pick to the Steelers, getting Dart at 21, and getting the extra picks. I think at least another Steelers next year first and a second this year. Look, I think it would be, in terms of stacking assets for the future, it'd be awesome. Do I think that it's going to happen? No. I think that you look at, the same situation. If they like Dart, right? They're not going to drop back 12, 13, how many spots it might be, and then go take him there. Like, because the way the NFL works, if you like a quarterback, you're not fucking around with that position of where you're at. Like, you're just not going to. Now, in theory, if you told me Saints don't like any quarterbacks and they trade out of 9, let someone go get their quarterback, and now they have extra picks and they could go address the O-line, the D-line, the cornerback room, add another playmaker, add a running back, then that to me is a little bit more enticing than like trading from 9 all the way back to 21 and then taking quarterback. Because how much do you like the guy if you were willing to drop back 12 spots in the first round? Like that to me would just be a little confusing. That's just where I'm at with it. Hoff C735, Chris, man, how you been doing? I'm doing well, man. Thank you for asking. I hope you guys are doing well. And I really appreciate you guys tuning in here on a what are we at? 10:30 in the morning. Really appreciate you guys being around. So thank you for asking. I'm doing well. Ken says, I'm not convinced. Oh, we went through this about McCord. Like I said, I think McCord is a prospect that I think will be linked to the Saints. I do. Yellowno says draft is deep at too many positions and quarterback ain't one. Quarterback can be had later if we can get the top two if we can get the two top prospects. Not much of a difference to me between Jackson Dart and Quinn Ewers with the fall off. I mean, I like Jackson Dart a lot better than Quinn Ewers. I'm not a fan of Quinn Ewers, but it's each their own. Obviously, everyone can see quarterback differently than everyone else. I don't know if Jackson Dart's going to be a great quarterback. I don't know if any of these quarterbacks are going to be great. And like I said, it's such a tough position to evaluate. I can sit here in front of a microphone and tell you, if they take Shedeur, he's going to be the face of the franchise. I really don't know. I don't know. But I'm just not a big fan of Quinn Ewers personally. But I watched a lot of Texas games. I just wasn't overly impressed by him. Although this past season, I'll give him somewhat of an excuse. He played through, I believe it was an AC joint injury. I can't remember, or oblique. Maybe it was an oblique injury. I can't remember which one he played through. Paul says Spencer went 0-6. That's hard to, even if he had won one of those games, there'd be a different feeling. I do agree with that. Look, I don't know. I don't know what it is when it comes to Spencer Rattler. Obviously I root for him. I think he's a talented football player, right? Like the arm talent's there, but Spencer kept making the same mistakes every single game. And part of that is being a rookie, right? If the Saints draft a quarterback this year, guys, there's going to be games where we're like, I don't know what the hell this guy's doing. It's part of the rookie growing curve. It happens. It's such a hard position to play in the toughest league. It's not easy. But it is kind of odd, right? Like I do believe Rattler for some reason, and this isn't a knock on Rattler. I would love for Rattler to be the face of the franchise because if he's your quarterback, I mean, he doesn't cost much for the next 3 years and you could build around everyone else. But, for me, Rattler has gotten a huge, and I'm not even saying pass because you're 4th round pick, but like it seems like the fan base is, their expectations are here. And in reality, where he's showing you is down here. So it's just not adding up. And I don't know what the reason is for it. I really don't. Saints Pelican 23 says Steelers want Dart. I could see that. Bayou Boys 504 says, I'm not going to lie, that scheme they had last year, nearly unstoppable, and you don't see a ton of talent for it to be unstoppable, just serviceable pieces and a smart, durable quarterback. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong about that. Yellow Nose says, I mean, let's be real. Jay Kaner technically had a statistically great season last year in college, but we saw, and nothing is promised. Can't get Sanders, then get one later develop. Paul says, Spencer went 0-6. Yep. Monslog says, outside of the first round prospects of quarterback, the rounds after the first have deep quarterback prospects basically close in skill level. Look, everyone's kind of different. The skill level part's interesting because you have various guys. Like you guys mentioned Kyle McCord. To me, Kyle McCord's kind of like your prototypical quarterback, the way you kind of see them. Then you got Jalen Milroe, who Milroe's highs are fucking high, man. Like Jalen Milroe's best plays are electric. And then Jalen Milroe has a stretch where I don't know if he should play quarterback because he just makes the wrong decisions. And it's a balancing of the inefficiencies of him that's tough. But I get your point, right? Like, it's not like you can't get the quarterback later. I just think for the Saints, if you're not drafting one at 9, I don't know if they should be drafting one at all because they have a lot of other needs. If you don't feel like there's conviction to take one at 9, then maybe you should just build out the rest of the roster for now. Doesn't mean I'm right. That's just kind of how I feel, you know? Kenneth says, what about Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders? Which one would you go with? Look, it's all preference and what you see out of them. You know, I really don't know. I think Shedeur is better personally, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints like Jackson Dart better. I wouldn't be. But I've watched more of Shedeur. I watched a lot of Jackson Dart. Actually, funny enough, when Jackson Dart was coming out of high school and he went to USC to start his college career, I sat down for an interview. He was a smart, sharp dude from then. Like, he gets it. But I just think I like Shedeur a little bit more. And I do believe with Kellen Moore's offense, having kind of a former quarterback to collaborate with, I do believe there'd be success there. So I might value Shedeur a little bit more. I just think he's a better kind of distributor of the football. But if the Saints took Jackson Dart, like I said before, guys, I wouldn't be mad about it. If you're telling me that you have conviction that one of these guys can be it, go for it. Logan says, are you going to be live for the draft? I definitely will be doing draft content. I don't know if I'll be live pre-pick. I'll definitely be live post-pick, though. But maybe I will do something live pre-pick, so we'll have like the initial reaction to the pick being made. So we'll figure it out. The logistics of it haven't been decided yet, but we will have some type of live show on that night. It's just a matter of, are we going live immediately after the 9th pick is made, or are we going live when the Saints are on the clock? So we'll figure out that. C735 says, if not quarterback in first round, who would you take if Genty or Warren isn't there? Look, it's a good question. I don't think they'll go Genty regardless. I think the Saints probably would just add a running back later on. But, Ted McMillan, someone that's on their board. Look, they've looked at some edge rushers, man, whether they've looked at Jalen Walker or Shamar Stewart. I don't want Shamar Stewart, though. I'm not a fan of his game. They've looked at guys like that. I don't know about Michael Williams. I don't know if the Saints would be in there, but I'd probably say maybe Ted McMillan they'll look at. I don't know what their grade is on Will Campbell. I think Will Campbell is probably going either the Patriots or the Dolphins. I think those are the two teams that probably do the most work. So maybe Ted McMillan. The Will Johnson train's kind of died the last couple of weeks, so it might end up being McMillan in that group. Calvin 14 says, if Milroe could hit the side of a barn with the doors open, he would be legit. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, look, there's times where Jalen Milroe, you'll watch him play. Like I watched Alabama, Georgia last year, and I'm like, holy shit, this kid's electric. And then you'll watch other games like Alabama versus Oklahoma, and you'll go, all right, like he's not that dude. And it's just tough to find that variance between it, Montauk says Milroe in the 5th could at least be our new Taysom Hill for cheap, but not as a future franchise guy. I mean, look, guys, I'm not going to knock you guys for suggesting stuff like that. I like the creativity. There really, and this isn't me trying to be biased towards a player I like, there really is only one Taysom Hill for a reason. It's hard to get the combination of speed, strength, and then willingness to play a multitude of positions that aren't the one that you came into the league wanting to play. And that's why there really is only one Taysom Hill right now. Other teams have tried it. You've tried, Jaguars tried to play Tebow at tight end briefly. Falcons have tried to play Felipe Franks at tight end. There's one Taysom Hill. There really is. Like, he's a great athlete, and there is that willingness to kind of put your ego to the side and say, I'll just do what's great for the betterment of the team and not for myself. Yellow Nose says the only pick I think would be fine with us is if that one defensive tackle from Michigan dropped us again. I get we need wide receiver, running back, and all that, but this draft is deep, though. Running back, I don't like at 9. They could go get a running back later on, and I'd be happy, right? Like, you look at this running back class, if the Saints take, Trevion Henderson, or if they take Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, who I really like, DJ Giddens from Kansas State, Jaden Blue from Texas. Like, there's a lot of interesting running back prospects that they could take. RJ Harvey from UCF is another one that I like. So, I don't need them to go 9, running back at 9, it doesn't need to be done. I think you could go get value elsewhere. Bio Boys 504 says, I've been seeing Saints now chat saying the Saints trade Olave. Do you think we will with him getting that many concussions? And do you think he can get back to where he needs to be? I do believe he can get back to where he needs to be. I think for him, it really is just a matter of staying on the field. Look, Olave, first 2 years was a 1,000-yard receiver with a really, less than ideal quarterback situation. The first year was with Winston and Dalton. And in the second year, it was Carr, but they weren't on the same page. And that offense for the Saints was broken for, I want to say, the whole year, really. They had some flashes of great play. Like against the Colts in 2023. They had a good game. But other than that, the Saints offense looked broken for most of the season. So I think Olave, when healthy, is a good receiver. I think he's a 1,000-yard receiver, no doubt. You kind of just like pencil him in. But it's that concern about concussions. I think for the Saints, because he's entering year 4, I would roll the dice one more year with him and then make your decision after this. You pick up the 5th-year option, so you have that leeway of next season. You don't have to worry about whether or not he is or isn't under contract. I'd pick up the 5th-year option. I'd roll the dice on this year, and then let's see where we're at. Can he stay healthy for 17 games? Can he get back to being an 1,100, 1,200-yard receiver? And then you could make a decision. Because I think right now, if you trade him, I still think you would get a day 2 pick, but you might be trading him, for pennies on the dollar as opposed to what he actually is worth. Because if the Saints said Olave's, up for trade after the second year that they drafted him, and he didn't have the 2 concussions that he had this past season, and he's coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, you're getting at least an early second for him. Like, that's a proven playmaker, young guy. But when he misses time this year and he has 2 concussions and there's concerns about his future, the value is a little bit of a hit. So I'm keeping Olave for this year, and I'm rolling the dice and seeing what happens. Calvin 14 says, Tet's overrated to me. Jaden Higgins would be a beast, though. I actually watched Jaden Higgins' tape finally last week, and he, to me, is the type of receiver that the Saints are missing. They're missing a bigger-bodied guy who can play over the middle of the field, can play him on the outside, can make great catches downfield. I would like Jaden Higgins. I think he'd be a good pick for the Saints. If the Saints were able to grab him at 40 and they went with a different position at 9, I'd be cool with that. Because I'm with you. I'm saying Tet McMillan the Saints might draft because he's just been rumored to them and he's someone that, allegedly they do like. But I don't love Tet McMillan the way everyone else does. Like, a Tet McMillan to me is either going to be Drake London or he's going to be, Arcega-Whiteside from Stanford who went to the Eagles and turned into an immediate bust. That's kind of where I'm at with him. And I just hope if the Saints do draft him, he ends up being the former and ends up being Drake London as opposed to Arcega-Whiteside, because he was not very good, Calvin says Dante Thornton would be a crazy project at receiver in the 4th, 6'5", 4.3, 4.3 flat out of Tennessee. I've seen people mention him. I forgot what other one people mentioned. Let me pull up the names here. Trying to remember what another receiver everyone was all up on. And this wouldn't be a project because he's a good receiver. I think people mentioned Trey Harris maybe for the Saints in day 2. But look, I got to go through, all the receiver. It's funny how the measurables change things, right? Like, I watched Xavier Restrepo from Miami, and I'm like, oh, this kid's good. And then you see the measurables and the 40, and I'm like, oh, fuck, he might not play in the NFL. And it's just so tough to know whether or not guys can be anomalies and whether the numbers matter for all of them. Everyone's different. But I'll check in on Dante Thornton and watch his game more. Yellow Nose says the draft is a wild weekend. You never know what will happen. Could end up in a situation where Genty, Travis, and T-Mac could be on the board at 9. Brace yourselves. We saw 5 wins, get the 9th pick. It's so crazy, right? Like the way the Saints played this past year, you thought that, they definitely get a top 5 pick. There was a moment, when they lose to the Panthers, I'm like, oh shit. Could they get the number 1 pick? Like I started saying, oh, could Travis Hunter be on the Saints? And you end up picking 9th. Crazy, man. So crazy. Yellow Nose says Winston's got that, Milrose got that Winston factor. He'll be the man and then looks legit. But then when he's off, brother, what are you doing? Yeah, I do think that's possible. But to Bayou Boy's 5-4 standpoint, though, he actually could fit the scheme. I do believe that. I do believe if Kellen Moore's in the business of finding his next Jalen Hurts, it might be Milroe. The problem, though, where it's not fair to Hurts to compare Milroe to him, is one thing about Jalen Hurts, whether you love him or hate him, steady. It's the same dude. It doesn't matter what the moment is, the down in situation, Jalen Hurts is Jalen Hurts, and he's calm and collected. Milroe, it's like waves, man. I don't know what the fuck you're going to get. He might be great in a big moment, and we've seen him be great in a big moment, and I've seen him, play poorly in a big moment because I just don't know what to get from him, so it's unpredictable. But he's a great athlete. Great athlete. If Kellen's looking for a dual threat guy, that might be his pick. That really might be his pick. But we'll see. I mean, look, like I said, draft is in. I'll pull up my mini calendar right now. What are we on you're on the 7th. Draft is in, if my math serves me correctly, what about like 17 days? 16, 17 days? So we're close. It's going to be interesting to see what the Saints decide to do. Obviously, I think there's a lot of excitement surrounding this because you are picking 9 and, you're trying to see if you can revitalize the franchise. And look, I don't know if the Saints are going to draft Shedeur. Right now, there's just so much chatter more than it is confirmation. But if the Saints take a quarterback at 9, you are finally entering a new era. Obviously, it's a different feel with Kellen Moore anyway, but there's a lot of the old stench around, right? Whether it's Mickey Loomis, whether it's bringing back Derek Carr and the vets. So I think that for me, if you end up going quarterback at 9, my outlook on the Saints changed a little bit in terms of where are they heading. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out, but that's just how I view it. So we'll see what happens with the Saints and Shedeur or just quarterback in general at 9. They're going to have a decision to make because I genuinely believe you'll have Cam Ward go at 1 to the Titans. And then, the next quarterback decision doesn't probably happen until the Saints, whether they take one or not. But that's going to do it, guys, for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. As always, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, leaving your comments and your thoughts. You guys have been excellent on this Monday morning. We'll have more coverage this week, and obviously as we lead into the NFL draft, we'll see what happens. Who knows? Maybe we'll have some splash reports coming out later this week. Regardless, though, make sure you guys subscribe to Boo Crew Media. Hit the notification bell so you get alerted for new videos from us. And as always, stay tuned for more content from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.